Welcome to another edition of HDPR Live. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin, and today we're going to talk about what is involved in handling a breakdown. I've got a great guest today. My guest is JD Redmon. He's the vice president at TTN Fleet Solutions. And we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we just kind of missed the intro on this live video. But for the purpose of the rebroadcast, I just wanted to get this going. And now we're going to jump right into our conversation with JD Redmon.
Have some hazards out there and he's actually closed down that lane to make sure that truck driver is safe. You're annoyed because you're a consumer and you're just trying to get to where you're trying to go. But where you're trying to go and what you're going to go purchase is only there because a truck driver brought it there. That's the one thing you have to have empathy towards. So when you see that driver broken down, move over. Not just for the driver's safety, but also for the repair technician's safety, the tower's safety, the diagnostic technician's safety. Move over so that we're not having these high casualty rates in our industry any longer. To answer your question about how often do trucks break down, our data at TTN Fleet Solutions shows that trucks break down on average of 3.2 times a year. Now that's a truck that's typically taken care of when we're talking about preventative maintenance, and I know we'll dive into that probably a little bit later. But our data shows at TTN it's about 3.2 times a year.
Okay, so 3.2 times a year. Does it ever happen at a convenient time? When does it usually happen?
So let's have that empathy again, guys. So if you're out there and you're not a truck driver, have you ever broken down? And the answer probably is going to be yes. And then let me tag this on. Was it ever convenient? The answer is no.
Never.
So even if it is a breakdown that takes place at 10 a.m., it's not convenient for that truck driver because he has a load to make. And what we don't realize is that it's not just a breakdown for that driver or for that carrier or for that fleet. What takes place is a chain of events called a supply chain disruption. Okay, that truck breaks down. Now we have a load that was supposed to be delivered. Let's stick with 10 a.m. That load was supposed to be delivered at 1 p.m. and he had 2 hours to go and he had about an hour buffer time for something like this to happen. If that breakdown takes longer than an hour, now that carrier could be fined for being late for that load drop. Okay, that shipper could be fined because that load is not dropped on time. That broker is now going to have a disruption with their shipper because that shipper is upset that the brokered a load with the carrier that didn't get the load there on time. It's never a convenient time for that truck to break down. Now, here's another thing though. What happens when that truck breaks down and this guy is up in his uptime, correct? He's in the beautiful time of his uptime. He just woke up and let's say it's 9 p.m. So he's going to be able to travel throughout the night and deliver that load at 6 a.m. in the morning and everything's going to be hunky-dory. But he breaks down at 3 a.m. in a small city in Alabama, and all mobile repair technicians around him do not operate 24 hours. So what does that driver do? He loses an entire day of work. He gets fined. And now that load is late. And now that shipper's upset. And now that broker's upset. All because of a breakdown that driver, be honest, whether it's a new truck or old truck, Jamie, it's going to happen. You're going to have a breakdown. So there's never a convenient time to break down, but there's always a convenient time to have empathy towards the driver that is broken down.
Yeah, 100%. And from the parts side of it, this is the irony of it. So imagine that you're a parts store and you're selling heavy duty parts to repair technicians, and you placed an order for a part that has to get here the next day, and it's
Oh,
on that
wow.
truck that broke down.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
like, this is why I talk about the importance of buying high quality parts, because if you can get that breakdown cycle to be less than 3.2, below average, because
Correct.
you spent a little more money on a couple good parts, I mean,
Correct.
the savings and what that does to the whole system. And that's the hilarious part, right? Is the guy who's waiting for the part to show up, it's on the truck that broke down. The mechanic
Correct.
should have bought the higher quality part in the first place, and just round and round it goes. Or when you're just in the general public and you're driving down the highway and you're moving over for that driver, I mean, what's on that truck? Is it
Yeah.
food for your
Yeah.
community? Is it medical supplies?
Good
Is
job.
it something you ordered and you're waiting for it to be delivered,
Good
with
job.
last of mile delivery? This is where we've got to raise the awareness of the way that this whole system just supports our society, and we've got to be
Yes.
there for those drivers.
But that's why old school truckers used to carry certain parts on by themselves. You know, they used to carry lights and bulbs and glad hand seals, and they used to carry an extra air hose in the back because they knew that something potentially could happen, and they wanted to be prepared for that to keep their journey going. What Jamie just described was a supply chain on the parts side of it. What I described was the supply chain on the repair side of it. But
Hmm.
I also gave you privy to the supply chain going back to the carrier, back to the broker, back to the shipper. So one breakdown has now upset and disrupted parts supply, repair supply, a carrier's relationship with a broker's relationship with a shipper, all because an air hose leak, all because of a brake seal leak, all because the truck stopped and he had a pop tire and he's in, the middle of 5 o'clock traffic and the guy's on the way to bring it to him to repair it, but it's 5 o'clock traffic. So it's going to
Yeah.
take an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there. And now his downtime is increased, which means what, Jamie? His uptime has decreased.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So
Horrible.
so let's go through what happens step by step from the moment the truck breaks down. And you're going to give us that perspective of the repair technician. I'll talk about it
Hmm.
from the perspective of the parts technician supplying the part that gets that truck back on the road. So the truck breaks down. What does the driver do first?
Are you sure you want to have this conversation, Jamie?
Let's go
Are
there.
you
Let's go there. We got to keep it
okay?
PG. I don't have a beat button, so we won't replicate the language used, but we got to talk about everything else that happens.
Okay, because that portion of it is what I was kind of looking at. Like, what do we want to dive into? So typically, what the driver does first depends on how their setup is. If a driver works for a Schneider that has their own breakdown team internally, then what that driver is going to do, he's going to call his own breakdown team. And
Okay.
that driver then is going to have the breakdown team geolocate where he is. The driver will then wait for his dispatch team to tell him where the tow truck is, where the mobile repair company is, or the diagnostic company is, whatever that driver needs. That conversation is going to be a triage conversation. Okay. Once that driver is sitting there and he's waiting for Schneider, Schneider says, "Hey, you're going to have a tow company come out and do a simple pull start for you in the next 55 minutes." And the driver then hangs up the phone and he's now just sitting there waiting for this tow company to show up. And anytime you're in a breakdown for some reason, Jamie, it seems like 1 minute is 10 minutes. So you look down and it says 5 minutes has gone by, but in your head, you're like, oh my gosh. So that driver then is now waiting. That's one scenario. The second scenario is the driver doesn't have any help. This driver is an owner operator. He's broken down in the middle of a city that he's not familiar with. God forbid that he doesn't have a smartphone, because some drivers still do have flip phones. That's just honest. Some people don't want a smartphone. But let's say they have a smartphone. They're now going to do what? Google nearest tow company near me. Search. Press this button. And now that driver is going to start haggling over whatever the price is that that tow company, that mobile repair company has for them. And then if they accept it, they're now going to call in. That tow company says, "I'm on the way in 55 minutes." Third option, you work with a company like TTN, who has 80,000 vendor network throughout the United States and Canada. We pride ourselves in picking up the phone quickly. We pride ourselves in making sure we get the drivers dispatched. But what we do, Jamie, is we have over communication via text, email, and phone. So that driver never feels abandoned. Either way, the driver will first pick up the phone and call. Now, either you have a call to support that you know, or you have called to someone that you have no clue of. But if you hang up that phone, he's now just waiting. That's what a driver does. He's going to wait until he can get taken care of.
Yeah, that's the experience. So, okay, so now the repair technician arrives on the scene. Let's say it's a mobile repair situation. We're not going to tow the
Okay.
truck to a shop. We're gonna fix it right there.
Okay.
Walk us through what happens. That repair technician gets out, and what happens next?
So what should happen is that repair technician should be in communication with that driver, giving them an ETA update, because that helps reset the clock of that driver. Regardless if you're working with TTN or if you're working just directly with the owner operator, remember, guys, call them, let them know about your updates. I know you want to listen to the ticket. I know you want to listen to Road Dog Trucking, but call them and say, "Hey, I'm 5 minutes away. Trust me, I'm right behind you." We should have hazards set up. We want to put back hazards at least 60 feet to 100 feet back, and that is for the safety of that mobile repair tech and for that driver. Now, if it's simply as an air hose, great. Unclap the glad hand. It might be a seal leak, great. Pop in the new seal, pop the glad hand back on. wipe your hands, he's gone. He's back on the road and he's trucking down that way. If it is not that, then that mobile repair tech is going to want to triage and try to figure out what's happening. He's going to have some type of diagnostic equipment, maybe a diesel laptop's computer, and he's going to then plug in and try to figure out what codes might pop up if it's not as simple as an air hose. But the first thing that mechanic will do when he gets to the truck to get back on the road is safety, triage. Then once you triage, you diagnose. Once you diagnose, now you fix it, and then that driver should be back on the road. If it's not fixable on the side of the road, if you're not working with a company, Jamie, that understands that they aren't the end all be all, that mobile repair guy should pick up the phone and say, you know what? You need to be towed to the nearest Love's. You need to be towed to the nearest safe location, get you off the road, and we'll figure out what we can do for you, whether that's to the nearest location of safety or to a heavy duty repair shop. Let's get you off of I-20 so that we can make sure that we have no additional casualties. That's what they should do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we get the truck to a place where it's safe to repair. It's been diagnosed. Now the part needs to be delivered to that location. I'll tell you from the parts perspective, as a sales guy, I was responsible for a lot of different accounts, and they would include sometimes independent repair shops and mobile. And I would hate it when I would get the phone call and it's like, hey, I just called your store and the parts guy said that half the crew is on lunch and they won't be able to deliver it for 3 hours. And it's like, man, like, this is a breakdown situation. You've got to get that part there. So a lot of times I'd jump in my truck, I'd grab the part, or I'd call one of the delivery drivers and say, hey, I don't care. We'll pay you 30 minutes OT. Just, get in that truck and get that part over there to that truck because that truck has to go. And I think that for me, I always had that perspective because when I started in the industry, I had this really tough customer, but he was a great customer because, paid his bills and bought lots of stuff from us. But he worked in supplying logging equipment and they were doing heli logging. And that's like $1,000 an hour
Oh,
per
yeah.
helicopter, right? So
Oh,
when there
yeah.
was a part down on a truck and that helicopter couldn't pull the logs and drop them, and it just created this nightmare situation. So he would be on me,
Yeah.
right? Give me the parts. I don't care how much it costs. So it was just kind of like really embedded in my kind of perspective really early in my career. So I've always been very sensitive to that. But sometimes, and this is where we're going to be honest,
Yeah.
sometimes our parts people, they are thinking more about their lunchtime or what they've got going on in their world, and
That's
they're
not
not
true, Jamie.
necessarily
That doesn't
sensitive.
happen.
Come
That doesn't
on, come on, we're
happen.
being honest here. They're not necessarily sensitive to that, and sometimes it's just because they don't ask the right questions. And I think
Right.
when I was on the counter, because of that early training I got from that really tough customer, I always ask, like, what's the situation? Oh, don't worry about it. The truck doesn't have to go for 2 days. We've got another truck in service. That's a completely different scenario than we just towed it. We're late now on this run and we got to get this truck back on the road.
No, you're right, because Jamie, what if you connected it to two things? The one I want to connect to is what you just said. If it is connected to any type of company or organization like a railroad service, a Halliburton, where they're on a job site, a BNSF, if that yellow iron isn't puffing smoke, they're losing thousands, if not millions at a time. That is the repercussions of having a breakdown. Or when it comes to that truck breaking down, what if it's a government load? What if it is a high dollar value load and it's a missile in the back of that truck? Now you have to call the National Guard or the nearest army base to come out and secure that load with that driver, all
Oh,
because of a
man.
breakdown. Like that's what people aren't seeing, that some of these trucks you're passing by, you have no clue what's in the back of that thing. It could be $5.6 million worth of iPads. It could be a missile. It could be a tank, if it's on a low boy. I mean, you have no clue.
Yeah, food, medical supplies, clothing. I mean,
Yes.
the necessities of life, absolutely. So, what roadblocks do the driver, the mechanic, they're the parts person, they're all part of like a team now. In
Of
essence,
course.
for this next 3 hours, they're a team. What
Of
roadblocks
course.
often come up that people should be aware of?
So the biggest thing that comes up is, and I'm gonna go back to it, and people are gonna hate that I keep saying it, it's a lack of empathy, because everyone's worried about themselves, everyone's worried about their own P&L, and typically when you're worried about your own P&L, if you're not getting the gratification that you need, or if you're not getting what you believe you deserve, you wipe your hands and you walk off. But let's just talk about when you say what roadblocks, typically an owner operator has no clue where they are. They don't know where the food is. They don't know where a rest stop is. They don't know how to get help in that city. That's a roadblock. Another roadblock is it's a small city. You have absolutely no service. Now you're broken down on the side of the road and you're looking around. You're like, well, I know I'm at mile marker 161, but who can I call? You're doing like this. You see the guy walking outside like that. And what do you do in that scenario? You have no service to call a taxi or even to get a lift. That's a roadblock. For the mechanic that's coming out, of the mobile repair guy or the tow professional, it could be traffic as a roadblock. It could be the fact that you are on a long list. Let's say it's in the middle of winter and it's the polar vortex like we dealt with last winter in Chicago. We pick up the phone, and even though TTN has great buying power throughout the United States and Canada, you could be number 9 on that list. So now you're waiting because honestly, who's to say your breakdown is more important than Jamie's breakdown? Why should my breakdown be more important? If Jamie called at 12 and I called at 12:45, Jamie got a 6-hour ETA. Now because I'm number 9, I get a 7-hour ETA or an 8-hour ETA. That's a roadblock. Now, when you flip it on and you've just talked about the owner operator, the carrier, or the mechanic guy, the parts guy, poor parts guy.
Yeah.
The parts guy is like the sound guy at the church or the sound guy at a concert. When everything's going good, you get mad love. But the
Mm-hmm.
moment something goes wrong, you turn around and you look back at the sound guy like, what are you doing? That's how the part guy gets looked at, because
Yeah.
he's dealing with traffic.
Yeah.
He's also having to source in his network whether or not he has the part. God forbid let's say he's in Atlanta and the nearest part that he needs in Atlanta is in Augusta. So he has to wait for it to be transported over to him. So now
Yeah.
your hold time and your wait time for that part isn't the part guy's fault necessarily, because you can't really accurately understand how to control your inventory for parts because breakdowns are random.
Yeah.
I hope
And
you guys are hearing me.
and you know what? From the parts perspective too, I think sometimes people underestimate how much business a parts store actually does. Like how
Oh
much,
God.
because you're dealing with accounts that are sending in stock orders. You're dealing with accounts that are buying and ordering as needed inventory to be delivered within an hour or two, and you're dealing with walk-in traffic. I remember this one time I had a guy, and we had it was just a weird situation where it looked like we had duplicated an order, and he says, look, this came to me on the same day, and there's, I can't remember, I think it was 80 or 90 invoice numbers apart, right? So it was like
Mhm.
invoice number, 100,900, and then the next invoice was a duplicate 100,990. And he goes, how did you do 90 invoices in like a couple hours? And I said, are
Wow.
you kidding, man? That's what we do like every day, all day long, 6 days a week. Like that's our business.
Yeah.
And he just had no, and this is a guy who'd done business with us for years. He bought, tens of thousands of dollars worth of product from us, but he still didn't understand the scope. And we were in a
Right.
small community. We weren't in a large center. Like we're in a small little industrial town. So, when I worked at stores at bigger centers, it was nothing to be pounding through 300 invoices in an hour. And so
Easy.
people don't get the scope of what the parts people are dealing with every day. And so sometimes my heart goes out to the parts people, because I know that,
Yeah.
and they often are the ones that kind of touch it last, because that part is ordered. And so whoever touched it last, it doesn't matter if the freight company didn't deliver it on time. It doesn't matter if the warehouse PDC shipped the wrong part. It doesn't matter. I talked to you last, so I'm mad at you, and now I'm going to rip you a new one.
100%. Go sit at AutoZone and
Yeah.
just sit there and watch those trucks come in and out. Find one driver and watch them, and you're gonna see 6, 7 trucks coming back and forth, and all they do all day in those little small S510 go back and forth, back and forth,
Yeah.
back and forth, back and forth. That's all it is. A part doesn't always mean that it is a engine or a turbo. It doesn't always mean that. It could be that little seal. It could be an air hose. It could be a bolt. It could be a screw. It could be a light bulb. So some of these things are ran out quickly and ran right back. So you're right, and I don't know why we don't have a grasp of how large our industry is, Jamie, even though we're in the industry.
Yeah.
It's so awkward.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's just wrap up our conversation today. What's something most people don't know about keeping trucks on the road and freight delivered on time? Let's give them one more kind of thing that maybe they haven't thought of before.
Simple, preventative maintenance. You have many truck drivers out there that will run their trucks to the ground, and then when they finally have a breakdown that they can't hide any longer, you can have a code that you can't force regen any longer, and you now have to take it into that heavy duty repair shop. And now instead of you having just a simple PM, you have a PM. You got to get the hoses changed. You got to realize that your brake seals are messed up. Now you realize that your axles are off kilter. Now you have to understand that, oh shoot, I haven't been taking care of my engine. Now they're telling me I might have to replace my engine, but I'm outside of warranty. So now the OEM doesn't care anymore, and this is stuck on me, and it's an $18,000 repair for it, and my electrical system's gone out. Preventative maintenance allows you to see things ahead of time. It's just like going to the doctor to get a checkup. I don't want to go to the doctor when I have stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
I want to go to the doctor, and I was just going to get a checkup on my routine 3 months, and he says, hey man, something's a little bit off in your blood work. Let me just take this and get a little bit more test. And that $100 visit or that $20 copay will now save me in the long run on hundreds of thousands of dollars if it were to turn out to cancer. I use that example of cancer as the seriousness of it, because trucking operations and trucking companies, Jamie, you can bankrupt a trucking company by one large repair depending on the size of that fleet. So take care of your fleet with preventative maintenance.
You've been watching HDPR Live. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin, and we've been speaking with the one, the only JD Redmon at TTN Fleet Solutions. You're a
Thank you, man.
beautiful man. I love you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and really, really appreciate you taking a little bit of time today to talk to our listeners.
We had fun. I'm glad to talk truck, Jamie. You're doing something that's needed in the industry, which is keeping the conversation going.